If you had childhood trauma and you've sought help for the problems that it's caused you in your life, you may have been told that you needed to get in touch with your anger to heal from the trauma. And I know for some people there is something freeing about that, for a while anyway. But if you were already angry, if you were already just barely holding in the rage or the irritability or the contempt you inherited from growing up abused and neglected, that's a really dangerous assumption that what you need is to go even deeper into those harsh emotions. The fact is, people with complex trauma can tend to get emotionally dysregulated. Feelings can go from a normal level to a surge level suddenly for seemingly no reason. And in the moment, it feels like the right level of anger. But later you can see what everyone around you could see in that moment, that it was an overreaction. And it's this kind of anger that can really cause problems in your life, especially when it becomes a habit or when anger becomes a kind of drug that you unconsciously use to get up and out of depression. And I'll explain that in a minute. So how do you draw a line between healthy anger, it's an emotion we need, right? And unhealthy, dysregulated anger? How do you know the difference? Now, before I had any healing from my childhood trauma, one of my biggest problems was in my relationship to anger. And one of the most hurtful things that anyone's ever said to me is, you know, you are a very angry woman. And it hurts even now to say that. My meditation teacher once said that I used to be what he called a serrated knife. But I was. I was rough. I was sharp. I was carrying a lot of anger. And that's not irrational. It's what I knew. Because first of all, the adults in my life when I was a kid went way out of control with their anger. I grew up watching my dad rage at my mom and my mom berate my dad, and the two of them would smash things and get violent. And even after they were divorced when I was 7, anger and rage became the default way that they communicated about anything. So we had a lot of alcoholism in the family, and drunk people make everybody angry, and the angry people make the drunk person angry. So I grew up terrified of anger in myself and of angry people. And I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I remember when I was 5 or so, I was angry in my own right about something, really angry. And instead of a temper tantrum, I went around the house and folded a folding chair, and I carefully took a vase down off the mantle and put it gently down on the hearth. And that was my way of saying I was fed up, damn it. I couldn't bear roughness, though. I couldn't bear the yelling and the doors slamming and the sound of breaking glass. There was a lot of that. The silence when you know something really terrible is coming, that used to really scare me. I hated violence. I still do. I hated the sounds and the smells of drunken people. And there was no way around it. It just put me on high alert and this weird kind of tension inside. So in my teens and 20s, I figured that I'd solved things by just avoiding angry people. And I thought of myself as a very peaceful, loving person. And it's not that I wasn't, but I had a lot of anger, and I didn't even know it sometimes. I remember before I ever learned to re-regulate my brain, my emotions were confused. When I acted angry, I was actually hurt. And when I was depressed, it was because I was angry. And I did passive-aggressive things like gossiping and making sarcastic comments. And I had BS'd everybody about what I was feeling for so long, I had no idea what I was feeling. And then I started therapy and had a place to talk about what happened. And it started out, I didn't really have strong emotions about my childhood, but boy, the therapist kind of confirmed how bad it had been, almost to a fault, I would say. And she'd want me to talk about it and talk about it. And soon, oh yeah, I had some serious anger going. And the more I talked to her, the angrier I got. First like the legitimate anger, but then kind of like this weird, like dissociated anger. And I read some books and I talked to other angry people, and soon, like everywhere I went, with everyone I hung out with, I was coming off angry. I was the angry woman. So I was a real drag to hang out with, to be honest. It was me now. It was I who was raging and smashing things like had happened when I was a kid. And I wasn't as bad as my parents, but I intentionally broke some dishes in the kitchen once. I threw a ceramic mug out the passenger window of a car. And even thinking about this now makes me feel awful. It was frightening to the people around me. So I don't want to do that. I thought I was getting in touch with my feelings, but actually I was losing control of my feelings, and I was learning to amp them up and almost dissociate using them like a drug to do that. It wasn't cathartic. There was no feeling of being done with the feeling. It just wore me out. It just tore me down. It alienated everyone. And there's nothing healing about that. So luckily, I stumbled on a new way to heal, and I quit that anger-based therapy and started using techniques that helped me very quickly get those harsh emotions quietly out, expressed. And this gave me comfort instead. It gave me a clear mind to get the focus off all the bad things from the past and onto my present day surroundings and how I was handling things. And from there, it was a lot easier to start solving problems and building a happy life. Now, maybe you're also in the process of finding the techniques that work for you, or understanding what part of your behavior is just trauma-driven and what is part of you. So if you want to learn more about common symptoms of childhood PTSD, I created a self-evaluation that you can take, and you can see what's happening for you. And there's a link to that. It's a quiz. I have a series of quizzes actually for different parts of your life and how CPTSD might have affected you. And I have that along with my daily practice calming techniques. And it's all on this page called the free tools page of my website, crappychildhoodfairy.com, free tools page. That page is linked down in the description section below. I just try to get it like into your hands very easily all the time. I'd like you to have that. Really, it's free. So these days, having stuck with my techniques for years and years and continuing to work on myself, I've made so much progress. And I wish I could say that kind of PTSD anger never comes back, but it does sometimes. And the progress is that I notice it right away and I can change course on it quickly. Some anger is normal and natural. It's a useful emotion. It's an honest response to unfairness and hurt. It tells you when action is required. With healthy anger, it flashes through you like burning paper. And sometimes it lasts longer, but at a certain point, when it's not helping you take action or solve problems, anger that lingers turns into unhealthy anger. And that is something many of us were encouraged to have, or in fact became addicted to having. Anger as a solution for pain. That's kind of the idea out there. And I wanted to tell you why it feels like that's true, that it's a solution, but it doesn't work. So you can think about your feelings on a vertical scale, all right? And way down here is death, or you're catatonic or something. And then right up here, well, right here, you're depressed. And then obviously there are degrees of depression, and it's a terrible place to get stuck. And if something you do or some therapy you try helps you go from depression to anger, which is pretty common in the psychology world, this might be helpful because it's up. You're going from depression up to anger. And it's pretty easy to help someone get angry. It feels good at first, doesn't it? Because it gets you out of bed and up off the floor. When you're hovering at the bottom of the emotional scale down here, anger and rage are a step in the right direction, and you think, wow, this is a breakthrough. I'm feeling my anger, and there's this energy to it. But it's a mistake to think that anger is the solution. This idea that feeling your feelings is inherently constructive is just not true. There's a time when we need to get in touch with our feelings, and a time to be angry, and a time to move through that. So if anger isn't transformed pretty quickly into some clarity of mind and sane action, it'll just take you right back down the vertical scale into depression, isolation, and down on the floor again. So what to do with the anger? For me, it is the most profound turning point of my life when I was shown how to put it on paper. And I put my fears and resentments about life and tragedies and the injustices and the petty little things that bother my mind. It all goes on paper, and I ask God to remove it. Now, you may not believe in God or any kind of higher power, and if that's the case, you can write it using my format and then write a release statement. So I ask God to remove it, you can release it. Writing and releasing is the core technique I teach, and this is how I had my transformation when I was sad and scared and struggling with PTSD symptoms. You just might be amazed at how much more effective and clear-headed you are with those resentful and blamey thoughts out of your head, at least for a little while, out and on paper, so that you can be emotionally free enough to see what needs to be done about problems. Because sometimes the situation is, it's just crying for you to jump in and act, to do something. And other times, nothing needs to be done. Sometimes it's just an angry, stray wisp of emotion that got dredged up and it softens and it's gone. So everything depends on you knowing the difference, asking yourself, is this anger something I need to attend to act on, to express myself, or am I basically having a CPTSD reaction? Now, when you have some freedom from the fearful and resentful thoughts, even if it's just for a little while, you're in a much better position to see the difference, to discern whether it's time to forget or time to get busy. And taking action is everything when it comes to healing your life. Now, if you're like I was when I was first using this freeing technique, I worried that if I lost my anger, I'd have no defense against abuse and pressure from people. And it's been my experience that the opposite is true. When my mind was tangled up with anger and resentment and someone was acting negatively toward me, I used to get paralyzed or confused. And I start flailing around trying to fix the situation without understanding what was going on. When I started releasing all that fear and resentment, and there is a technique, again, it's a technique. It's not just journaling, it's not just, I release it. But when I was actually getting free of all those racing negative thoughts and beliefs, I could see. I knew when I was being attacked, and I knew when the disturbance was actually in here. I got clarity. And with a clear mind, I'm able to take responsibility when that's in order. I can respond appropriately to problems. I can either protect myself or get away from problems and danger, or stay and work things out if that's the right thing, if that's what I want. I have a choice. And if you do this consistently, you have fewer problems. And when things do go wrong, you can work them out more gracefully. You don't have to fret. You don't have to freak out. When something upsets you, you're in the habit of clearing things up. So you know what to do first. And that's to calm the inner disturbance so that you can be clear what you need to do. Most of the time, all you need to do is take a deep breath and carry on. Now, if you want to learn how you can practice these techniques, I've got this video right here that summarizes it, and I will see you very soon.